That's when I did one of those, what would a, mediocre white man do? And he would do it. He would apply. He would try to do the job. And I was like, cool, let's go do this. But there was this fear from that small town. And then I moved to Los Angeles, and you can imagine people going, what is she doing?
And then just like that, there's a LinkedIn post. Jen's back.
Because I have been listening to your podcast and other guests, is I hear these stories of these expectations of needing to achieve and doing more and doing better. That's not how I played, was like the white picket fence. That wasn't me.
So you knew that as a child.
I knew that as a child.
Jennifer Lewis is someone whose career crosses borders, disciplines, and expectations. But what stands out the most isn't her resume. It's the values that have guided every step of her journey. A respected media executive in both Canada and the US, a trusted mentor, and a leadership coach, Jennifer lives the R in the truth framework, root in core values. In today's conversation, she shows us how grounding yourself in what matters most can shape your decisions, your resilience, and your entire life. This is a powerful one. Jen, thanks for coming today.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for being a part of the Who Project. Wow, we've had this conversation about the show and what it's about. And we have such a history, but the history was kind of broken by you taking off and going stateside for quite some time, and we'll get into that.
Yep.
But when I think about when we first met, and I did the math, I was like, man, this is like 24 years ago. And I was so green at what I was doing. And I think at the time you were a supervisor, a media supervisor.
I would have been 5 years in, yeah.
Right? And so I just remember you, Sabrina. What was your receptionist's name? Do you remember?
Penny.
Wow. Yes. So Penny and Sandra Hayes.
Mm-hmm.
Melissa Kilpatrick.
Yeah.
Right? So these were times where I really didn't know much of what I was doing, but you guys were so kind. You know, a lot of what I say to my wife today is the things that I've accomplished, I attribute to certain people, right? Because you helped me on my journey. So to that, in fact, I'd like to say thank you.
Thank you.
No, I mean, I'm being completely honest here, like that. Those early days when I really didn't, and we were selling, Ghost Station, at the stations, not even on the trains. At that point, it was just stations, and we didn't have the path or anything like that at IMA Outdoor. And you guys gave me a shot, and you saw the value in what we were bringing, but you also allowed me to learn, as I was going, and cast no judgment, at least not to my face. Man, so when I think about it, and it seems like a lifetime ago, because that was like even before our last two kids were born, so it's so long ago. And then I followed you to Starcom.
Yeah.
And then you decided that you were going to take off and, be a big shot in LA.
Well, Starcom gave me the opportunity to go to LA and re-earn my stripes to become a big shot in LA.
And that was an amazing opportunity, and the courage that it took to do that.
Yeah.
To just go by yourself.
Yeah. And I think what was good though is originally I was told it was only going to be 2 years. And I was like, oh, I can do anything for 2 years. Turned into 17. But it's interesting because when I think of that, and this doesn't go with our script at all, but is this, when we think about lockdown that we all went through like 5 years ago, how grateful are we today we didn't know how long that was going to be when it started? That for me is LA. I didn't know how long it was going to be be afraid of that. I was like, it's 2 years. I can do this. Lockdown. It's only a couple weeks. I can do this. Like, it's interesting how sometimes not knowing is really super helpful.
It's funny that you say that, because I have times when you read the newspaper or whatever, right? Or you watch a documentary on, a criminal case, and somebody goes to prison for like 25 years. I pause in that and go, how does any human being deal with that? I couldn't deal with 25 minutes, never mind 25 years. So I understand what you're saying, right? It totally makes sense. So you went into it with a an idea of it's only 2 years and hell not, it's an adventure.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah.
then how did it? So then it just renewed after the.
Yeah, so I went
What
down.
happened?
So
How
I
did it
went
turn into twins?
down on a work visa, and the visa I had at the time, it was for 3 years, and it could be extended twice for an additional 2 years. As happens in a lot of these stories when people move countries, I ended up dating a guy that a friend introduced me to in like my third weekend in Los Angeles. And I ended up staying with him for 9 years there. And we had fun. He gave me a lot of structure, introduced me to a lot of stuff in LA, which was great. And because I was in this relationship, I kept wanting to extend my time there. And originally, when I went to Los Angeles, I was still working on Canadian media. I was doing the Canadian work for Walt Disney Theatrical and Home Entertainment. I was still doing Canada because they didn't actually have a marketing team here in Toronto at the time. So I went down there to teach the client about Canada and also learn about the studio business. So that was first few years I was working exclusively on Canadian business, managing a team here in Toronto, working with the time zones. And then over time, that evolved. And they're like, Jen, you can do other stuff. Here's some US stuff. Can you do this other thing? So by the time I left, I was touching nothing Canadian. And I was just really working on American clients and having that perspective. And I had to earn my way into the American media side. I think that was one of the big challenges was, oh, she's Canada. She doesn't know the US. So those first few years, there was a little bit of bias there, and then got over that and was able to prove I could do it. And by the time I left there 17 years later, I was basically running the Los Angeles office and a lot of the key accounts there and managing that team.
And then just like that, there's a LinkedIn post. Jen's back.
Yeah. The reason I came back to Canada is during lockdown, I wasn't seeing my family, and my nephew was like 5, 6 years old at that time, and I wasn't seeing him. And I'd come back to Canada and he'd be really shy for those first like 6, 8 hours. Like he wasn't sure who I was. And I was like, nah, this isn't happening. So I started to network and say, hey, I'm thinking of coming back to Canada. My good friend Martine's like, hey, Jen, I just saw a posting over here. Let me send an email to introduce you to the HR team, and you should go talk to them. And talk to Sarah Thompson, who I'm a huge fan of, and got the role, which was also a big thing because that job coming back to Canada was a C-suite job. It was fancy chief client officer title. And there's like, Jen, you're not fully qualified. You don't have all the things. And you haven't worked in Canada. Can you do this? And that's when I did one of those, what would a, mediocre white man do? And he would do it. He would apply. He would try to do the job. And I was like, cool, let's go do this, Jen. You can do it. But it did take a moment of like second guessing myself and just going, yeah, I can do this.
See, this is why I love talking to you. So when you came back, we connected. I think we did lunch or something. And it was like, we didn't miss a beat.
Dead stopped me at the out of home event. First like 2 weeks back. You saw me walking by and I was like on a mission and you're like, Jen, you're just going to walk by me?
Oh my goodness. I didn't remember that.
Yeah, that happened.
But then we chatted and then I guess we had lunch at some point and we started talking and it was like, we didn't really miss a beat.
Absolutely.
Right? It was one of those things where I always say this now. It's like, your people.
Absolutely.
Right? And so you know how to like, when you find your person or your people, right, then you just get along. So we sat down, we talked, and I remember we were just talking. It was a weird place and time for me, right? And so I was just trying to figure out like what's gonna be my next, and where's my life going? And you sat there and you listened and you nodded and you smiled, and then I guess we did it again, and I was like, okay, here it is. I want you on the show, and will you come do it? And you got it right away, and you said yes, without skipping a beat. So again, thank you. So when this first started, I was so curious about just people of first generation, right, Canadians, and as I was having these conversations, I started to realize when I was having these conversations with you, I'm like, you know what, this would be super cool to find out what somebody that's third or fourth generation, their perspective on life. And is it different? Because
Mm-hmm.
we tend to think it is. I tend to think it is. Right? I tend to think that, as a first generation Canadian, that I'm running a race that I can't catch up to for what, and I don't know what
Mm-hmm.
this race is, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm behind. And so when I asked you to come on the show and we talked about this, you got, yeah, I totally like to share that, my perspective,
Yep.
because you called me up and you said to me, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said, Paul, thank you. I listened to your podcast. Thank you. She goes, you said, as a white female leader, I never had that perspective of what your guests were saying.
Yeah,
And
for
I
sure.
was like, yes, right?
Yep.
Job done. Now let's flip the script and find out about you
Mm-hmm.
and what it looked like for you and your family. So my first question for you, right, is actually it's a quote. It's a quote that I wanted to say. It was by Maya Angelou, and she says, you can't really know where you're going until you know where you've been."
Mm.
And that's why I always love to start the pod about family.
Yeah.
Family is so much of who we are, and it shapes, our perception of ourselves, and then we have to grow from there. But I love to hear the story. So tell me about, where your people are from, the household, the energy that surrounded you at home.
Mm.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I grew up in Woodstock, Ontario. Shout out to Woodstock. Great place to grow up. And it was my parents and my younger brother. So there's the four of us there. And didn't have a lot of money going. My dad worked in a factory until the factory closed. And then he did some night jobs and all those kinds of things. Ultimately, he settled into being part owner of a cab company and driving people around a small town. And people now still talk about him there, which is beautiful. And my mom worked in a lot of different office jobs. And at one point, she went back to college while I was in college, which is really cool. But we never had a lot of money, but there was always space to explore. And I remember, even though we didn't have a lot of money, we were one of the families that got one of the first computers with those old, all the green text on the black screen, printing my essays on dot matrix printer. And I remember people in school just thinking I was some sort of keener by typing it. But my mom was like, you need to learn this, and encouraging that exploration. And she did that in other ways. I was sewing in front of a sewing machine when I was 7, because she's like, you can't break it. It's all metal. Go play it. The worst you're going to do is cut yourself or break a needle, and all of that can be fixed. So there was very much this sense of explore and try and see what's there, which I always appreciate and reflect on now.
So would you say mom had an open mindset?
For sure. Just try it. And it's interesting because my mom grew up on a farm. She was in 4-H. She did all that stuff. She was the youngest of 4 with 3 older brothers. And I think there was just this sense of freedom she had by having the older brothers protect her. So she could do whatever she wanted because she had that sort of security there. So it was always go try it.
And it seems like from what you just said, your father would have had, an open mindset as well. It's like, I've got to try this. I got to try that. I got to make it work.
Yeah. And his thing, especially as a cab driver, was talking to people. He loved getting people's stories. He ended up being invited to weddings of people that he met by driving them around town.
No.
Yeah, that happened.
Wow. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And so coming from this small town in Woodstock with parents with open mindsets, there's no doubt, we opened this conversation about you being, just picking up and going to LA.
Yeah.
And this adventure. You see how it connects the dots, the dots line up for me.
Yeah.
And I love that part about telling the story about, other people's lives, because you really do see it, right? You do see where you came from.
Well, and I think it's interesting because I went to college in Windsor for advertising and moved to Toronto for my first job in advertising. And I remember my parents saying that their friends were like, how are you letting her move to that big city? And my parents were like, what do you mean letting her? It's her life. It's Toronto. It's not that far. And what's the worst that's going to happen? But there was this fear from that small town. And then I moved to Los Angeles, and you can imagine people going, what is she doing?
Yes.
But my parents were like, go live your life. Do this adventure.
For a second.
Yeah.
From Woodstock to LA.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That is an incredible story. How did your family's story shape your sense of what's possible? Did you walk with that? Like, was that conscious or was it subconscious to you? Just knowing like where you came from and how your parents, like say, stick handled their way through life. Did you see that consciously, or was it an unconscious thing that just happened?
I think I appreciate it now more, but there was this tenacity of just keep trying, that I did take, and just like, let's see what happens. And I appreciate that if I'd failed at any of that, I could just go home. So there was a safety net, which not everyone has. And I appreciate that. Even now, and having recently lost a job in the summer, which was a gift. But like, I wasn't ever afraid of it because I'm like, worst case scenario, go live in my brother's basement. I have zero interest in doing it. But in the back of my mind, there's always this safety place that I can go if I had to. Like the worst case scenario isn't really that bad.
I love that. I've spent a lot of my life, worrying about the future. not about the past, really. It's a lot of it's about the future.
Yeah.
Right. And I've come to realize as I've aged that I don't have control over that. Right. And being present is the most important thing. So when I hear that from you, it makes me pause and go, yeah, she's damn right. Like you can't live life in fear. What's the point?
Yeah.
Really?
Exactly.
What's the point? So yeah, thank you for that. That's a great tidbit that somebody listening to is going to take away. That's the coach in you, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that part.
Well, and here's the other thing I want to reflect on, because I have been listening to your podcast and other guests, is I hear these stories of these expectations of needing to achieve and doing more and doing better. I never had that. My parents would have been perfectly content for me to stay at home and live in Woodstock and work wherever in the local town. Like I never had that pressure that I needed to achieve, which is something I've been reflecting on. I did achieve, and I'm proud of what I achieved, but it wasn't a pressure or an expectation. It was just go try and explore. So it's something I've been reflecting on.
I think, if I may, and I can't speak for all of my guests and everybody that's a first generation for sure, but I can speak, to the conversations that I've had and how I've looked at it, is that pressure is because you just got here and somehow you have to prove your worthiness. Right? So when we're always looking for external validation, that's where that comes from.
Yeah.
Right? And especially if you have somebody or people of color or visible minority that have come to this country 50, 60 years ago, that's amplified. Right? That thought process amplified because you want to be respected, you want to feel like a peer, you want the world to look at you as an equal. So that's the challenge, right? So I'm having this conversation with my parents now. I'm like, you know what, like my wife and I we're gonna maybe spend some time out of the country. My mom goes, why would you want to leave? Why would you want to leave? I said, Mom, this worked out perfectly for you. Right? This life that you guys curated worked out perfectly for you. And I go, what's remarkable is that you left the island of Barbados at 21. You moved to Great Britain, right? You spent like 17 years there. And then in your late 30s, you move again to Canada. And I go, you're telling me I can't do it?
Right.
Like, yeah. It just doesn't make sense. But again, I think what that is that they took the risk, right? So that you could have this better life. And then they put that pressure on you to ensure that you would become, in their mind, a success. It's wild to think about.
I think, though, for me, where it's really helpful to reflect, though, is as a leader of teams, when I was doing that, is everybody's story is different when they walk in that room. And it's even more incredible. I know we'll talk about where I'm going now with coaching, but every person and what trust and what safety is looks very different. And when you're in a team trying to create a cohesive set of goals, that story of origin affects how that person shows up every single day. And I don't think we appreciate how important that is in society today versus the old white men who run a lot of these businesses right now. And their expectations, everybody has to conform.
Yes.
And I think teams are so much stronger now when we don't conform and we take advantage of all those different perspectives, and the different fears and way we all show up is so important.
I love that you just said that, because you're right. There's a hierarchy of, this is the way I think, therefore you must do.
Mm-hmm.
And you must do it this way, and there's no other perspective of looking at it. And by the way, we don't value what you have to say anyways.
Yep.
Right? So if we can see, a change, and man, that's exactly the end goal, right? Is that people show up to work, that people show up in a room, and they get to be their authentic self.
Yep.
And there's a pod I haven't released yet, but we talk about that. We talk about code switching, and we talk about how you navigate your life, specifically in corporate Canada, when you feel like you have to be different,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have to show up differently. You have to conform. What parts of your family story still guide you, and which ones have you let go? Because I always say I want to take the best from my parents,
mm-hmm.
right, and then I want to dump the rest.
I appreciate, so I didn't mention this, both of my grandfathers were born outside of Canada, one in Scotland and one in Wales. Both of my grandmothers were born in Canada, like 4th and 5th generation Canadians. But as I look back and see who's traveled and immigrated where and when, I'm like, my freedom right now is what they were coming here for. So I just appreciate that. And I hold that. And you're going to get me crying today. It's all good. It's fine.
You want me to go get you a tissue?
No.
No?
Tears just mean something's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That's important. It's very important. Okay, I'm going to switch gears.
Do it.
Let's switch gears here. The second part of what we talk about is self-perception. And I love quotes, right? So
yep.
Brene Brown, we all know Brene Brown, right? Owning our story and loving ourselves through that process is the bravest thing we'll ever do, right? From her book, The Gifts of Imperfection.
Yeah.
Man, self-perception is a heavy one for me. Very heavy one for me that I've been working through. So when I get to this part of our conversation, man, I just love to hear how we see ourselves, because I believe so many of us do not give ourselves the flowers we deserve. So how would you describe your early self-perception, the way you saw yourself and your own potential?
Let's see. I think early me just wanted to learn and do. Like, I think it's interesting. I was never the little girl that wanted to be married and have kids and do all of that. Like, that's not how I played, was like the white picket fence. That wasn't me.
So you knew that as a child.
I knew that as a child. And now still single, no kids. And I'm very content with that choice. And I think, so that is a self-perception thing. I think there's been points in time when I've been with different people where I felt like the pressure to want to go get married or the pressure to want to have kids at certain points in my life. And it's like, it doesn't feel right. And that's not good for anyone else. I think the other part is this desire to do more. As much as I appreciate Woodstock, it doesn't fit me now. And I often joke I'm a city girl. Like, I went from Woodstock to Windsor for college, to Toronto, to LA, back to Toronto. At one point in my life, I was looking to actually move to Madrid. I was also actively looking to move to London. And cities are my vibe. I love being in the center of the masses and having everything possible to do at your hands. And for me, that's just that there's so much to know and learn and do. And just that curiosity is so important to me. And
you're the second guest I've had that knew when they were a child exactly how they wanted to live their life. And that amazes me. I think growing up, I knew I wanted to be successful. but I didn't know what I wanted to, what I wanted to do. It's like, so when I hear people tell me that they knew exactly that what they wanted or what they didn't want at a young age, I kind of look at you funny. I'm like, how did you do that? Like, how did you pull that off? Um, was there a time when you saw yourself in a way that didn't match how others saw you?
I think, and that's my thing is I think, is there's been plenty of times I think in my career where I got invited into a room. I was like, why am I here? And played small and then had to reflect and go, wait, people actually want to know what I have to say. I have the experience and the point of view here. So I think there's times that I played small. I'm currently also doing some coursework and getting feedback for my coaching so that I can do things. And even from the last 2.5 years in the team I had the privilege of working with, some of that feedback was really helpful in ways I didn't perceive. I think for me, the gap between intention and how it is received is something I underestimate. And often I feel like I need to just be more clear about saying, this is why I'm doing this thing. And a great example is when I was in Los Angeles, I had a boss who was always saying, Jen, you're not presenting at the front of the room and the all staff, like people need to know you. And I was like, there are 75 people here, all who know me and all that I know. I don't need to stand at the front of the room for them to know me. And I would give that opportunity to someone else on my team. And my boss always thought I should be taking the center stage. And I was like, that does nothing. In this safe space of our peers, I want my team to get practice presenting. So there was an intentionality I was bringing to it, but my boss was thinking I was just trying to hide. So I pivoted and then I started introducing my people and doing like a 3-second setup of why this other person was presenting. So I still got to be at the front of the room.
Smart.
And the other person got to do the thing. So I was able to appease both things there. And I think that for me has just been really eye-opening, is that intentions versus how it's received, and that we can't always control that. But it's important to understand and create that self-awareness that it's not always going to be what you expect.
Okay. So you've answered my next question. How did your self-perception evolve? Right? And you saw that. So you're mindful enough, or self-aware enough to make that pivot, which is, those are skills that a lot of people are challenged with. So, dare I say, it's a superpower. It's one of your superpowers.
I think it is now. I think it's also why, as a coach, I can also, coach training helped with this, but listening at a deeper level. And when I say that, it's not listening just to respond, not listening to hear. It's listening for the meaning and listening for the things that aren't being said. Where are those micro pauses that you're like, somebody's deciding whether or not to say this, and be able to go, okay, what was in that pause? And get really curious there. And that, I think, is a superpower as human beings. How are we more human? And listen for that and try and get to that second level of a human being in that relationship.
So smart. I love it. I'm so happy you're here. Jeez. I believe, and I'm gonna switch gears, and we're gonna talk about values. The reason you're here today is we're gonna talk about values, right? I believe our values are the foundation of integrity. They remind us of who we are when the world tries to tell us otherwise. Man, I wish I'd known that when I was a kid. So in my truth framework, we talked about the truth framework.
Yep.
The R stands for root in your core values. And that's the pillar I want to explore with you today. Right? Let's get into that. What core values guide you to show up in the world?
So again, I've done a lot of work on this with coach training and being coached myself. And my core values are courage, curiosity, and trust. As a coach, I try to get people to get down to 3, because everything we do for me ladders up to that. For me, courage is showing up here. It is doing the thing afraid. Like moving back to Canada, I was slightly nervous about. Moving to Los Angeles, I was nervous. But courage shows up when you do it anyway. And curiosity is about how we connect to other humans. And I think we don't bring enough curiosity to that. And I don't know why somebody is like screaming on the street. Like, I have no idea what is happening to this person who just tried to cut me off when we're driving. I don't know. So, what is the story we don't tell ourselves? And how do we get curious about that and stop making assumptions? So, that's where curiosity comes for me. And it's especially important leading teams, which is a separate thing. But trust for me is foundational. And I've realized more recently how important that is to me. It wasn't always one of my core values because it was always just there. So it never occurred to me it needed to be a value. But I've had moments in the last year where I was surrounded by people I didn't trust. And I realized I can no longer be in those situations. And I'm going to self-select out of those now. So I think that's where I've had to realize that is a place where I'm going to make decisions from, is trust.
That's a lot to unpack. And I love it.
I've spent a lot of time with my values.
Yeah, clearly. One of the things that stuck out for me, what you just said, was you felt some trepidation of coming back to Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
There was a story in my head that coming back to Canada was failing in the US. Like, I think there's a nuance in Canadian society. I think that sometimes if you make it in the US, you've made it. And then coming back to Canada is a failure. It wasn't a true story, but I got it in my head for a while. And I wasn't sure about like what friends I had, how I was going to make more friends as a 50-year-old, and where my community was going to be, and how easy or hard that was going to be. And there was moments that were harder than I expected. Fortunately, I had a lot of friends around me and support, which was great. And reconnecting with people like you, I go, wait, we can just fit back into this. It's great. But there was some fear about it, for sure.
Do you think fear comes with age? Because when we go back 16 years, there was no fear. It was like, I got this. Going for 2 years. No big deal.
But it was only for 2 years. So it didn't have to feel as scary.
But this doesn't have to be forever either.
It doesn't. I think there was just a lot of pieces that were changing when I moved back to Canada.
That's fair.
It was a new company, new job, new boss, new role, new team. I hadn't lived in Toronto in 17 years. The city is very different now than it was when I left.
It sure is, isn't it?
I mean, where I live now was all factories when I left. Yeah. And now it's a really lovely neighborhood.
Yeah.
Or it's going to be, I think. So yeah, there was some fear with that of just the unknown. But also in my core, I knew it was the right thing to do. For me and for my family.
Did you write those values before you came back?
Yeah. I had started, so in late 2017, I say the phrase, I was gifted team coaching when I was at Starcom in the US. They had some internal coaches and external people doing that. And for me, it was profoundly transformational. I was also a year into therapy as well. And I think the combination of coaching and therapy together were just so profoundly transformational for me. But during coaching, one of the first things any good coach should have you do is name your values and work that out, because it creates space to make decisions for everything else you decide to do after that. So I've had courage and curiosity, yes. The third one has evolved and changed to the point I can't even tell you what it's been in the past now. But yeah, I've had those ones for a while. I also, 2017, 2018, as part of those exercises, created a life purpose statement, which also becomes, for me, a bit of a bellwether. Does this choice I'm making align with my life purpose statement?
Okay.
This is where your curiosity should be, Jen. What's your life purpose statement?
Yeah. I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, man, she's answering the questions before I ask them. And I love that. That's when you know it's a great conversation, in my mind anyways. Because I was going to say, when were your core values tested? But you just told me when they were tested. They were tested you coming back to Toronto. And what did it, but what did it teach you? Once you came back and maybe some of that fear or anxiety or whatever, however you want to describe it, did it just immediately dissipate?
No. Definitely not.
Well, maybe if we put it into two different buckets.
Yeah.
One, when it comes to your family and your friends,
Yep.
that probably came down really quickly because you were welcomed back with open arms and
Yeah.
everybody loves you. And then you're getting into this. Now we're back in Canadian media
Yeah.
in a new role. Like you said, C-suite role,
Yeah.
and there was a learning curve.
There was. And I settled, what I did was create trust with my direct report team. I had amazing team. I still stay in touch with a lot of those people that I don't work with directly right now. And creating trust with them and being really explicit about what I was trying to do and trusting them to communicate out to teams and to make sure it was vision. So I really took a step back and I was like, I'm not micromanaging you. I'm not micromanaging the team. I'm going to trust you to do this and bring me in when I'm needed. And I'm going to work on some of these bigger visions things, which I did. The needs of that company have evolved, which is why I'm not there. But I think that also helped. And I do think what was surprising to me and what I was really nervous about was I hadn't been in the industry for 17 years. How many people did I know? How many people was I going to be able to reconnect with? And that has been the greatest gift for me. And when I left, I was working on a lot of things that did do out of home. So that's always been where my heart is. And that's where a lot of those connections are, is very much in the out of home media space. And it just brings joy to my heart because I'm still passionate about it. But those are where I had the deepest connections and relationships. And those are the people I still talk to a lot right now as well.
Connection.
Mm-hmm.
Such an important word now.
Mm.
I see it to be one of the most important things as I age, right? Before it was, we just network or whatever, but real, meaningful, true connections.
Mm-hmm.
It's what you really need. It fills your soul. It fills the cup, right? To be around really good people that share your worldview. You don't always have to agree. Sometimes the best things happen by just saying, okay, we can agree to disagree and move on. But just having that connection with folks that you can have a conversation with or break bread with, it's amazing. And I'm so happy for you because you came back and it just fell back into place, which was good. Really, really,
it
really
did.
good.
It was lovely.
Tell me about, I know you've alluded to it, but I'm going to dive into this now. Talk to me about the coaching. And so we know that the coaching began in LA.
Mm-hmm.
And because of events this summer, and you and I having, lunch again and talking about this, you're now 100% all in on the coaching.
Yeah. Yeah. So the journey there was when I received coaching myself and it was so transformational, I got really curious. One of the things about me is that one of my safe spaces is in educational environments. Like school was always safe for me. So going and doing courses is super safe for me. I love doing that. So when I got curious about coaching, I went and chose a program, did their training program. It was a 5-month program pre-lockdown. So we were in person in hotels in LA with this group of 20 people who were all trying to be coaches, one weekend a month for 5 months in the training program. And then certification was after that. So I'd started certification before lockdown and then it finished during lockdown. And then I did another program, which was the Leadership Circle Profile, which is a really incredibly powerful tool to use in coaching. And then I wasn't really using the coaching. I think I became a more skillful leader as a coach. And I was doing some clients, not very much. I wasn't putting a ton of effort there. And when I moved back to Canada, being a senior executive, it felt really unethical to be talking to people about coaching who most of my network was somehow related to the industry. So it wasn't something I was pursuing. And then because of the job change, it's where I gave myself a little bit of time to go, what feels right? And getting back into that industry, working in that same role, just as like, no, there was a bit of a pit in my stomach about that. I was like, okay, what do I want to do? What is the part of that job that I loved? And it was working with the people and mentoring and helping to grow my team and seeing people get promoted and succeed and fulfill their goals and understanding their goals. And so I was like, that's actually what I want to do. And I was like, Jen, you're actually trained in this. Like, let's go spend some time. And I started talking to people like you and other people in my network going, hey, does this sound crazy? And everyone's like super supportive about it. So I was like, okay, let's just do this. And I've, over the last sort of 4 or 5 months, I've been able to really articulate what I want to do. And you said connection is really important. I think as AI becomes so prevalent and people are doing their jobs with all these automations and talking to their computers, leaders need to be more human now than ever. And I want to create space and help leaders build those really human connections and find a way to find their own humanity and how they show up at work and not also be robotic like the computers our teams are talking to. And how do we create that real human honesty and vulnerable connection and show up as a human being where you get to say, I'm having a crappy day. Like, can we table this until tomorrow? That's human when your team has the permission to talk to you as leader and be human. And I really believe during lockdown, all these corporate jobs, we were working from home. We had to see everyone as human because you saw their kids, you saw their pets, you saw their bedrooms in some cases.
Yeah, true.
Like, how do we go back from that place?
Very
and a
true.
lot of leaders are trying to make us go backwards. And I'm like, no, like we became more human under pressure. And I want to really help teams do that collectively.
So, love that. Love it. You know, and as you're talking about it, I'm thinking those companies that are human centric first, right? Like those are the companies that you want to tackle and you want to speak to and you want to work for, not you, but anyone, right? Yeah. That really looks at, you know, the value of, you know, the most valuable assets are their people. And organizations that don't understand that, they want to go backwards.
Yeah. And I was talking to someone yesterday who was interviewing for a role in Toronto, and it was a 5-day a week, mandated in the office. And if you left for a doctor's appointment, even if it was like in Ajax and the office was downtown, they still wanted you to come back to the office after the appointment. I was like, that is the antithesis of human-centered leadership. I was like, it's 2025. Why are we doing this? It didn't make any sense to me. And I was just like frustrated by that kind of direction. The person I was talking to ultimately chose not to work for it because they're like, our values don't align. If that's what's important to you is FaceTime, that there's no trust in that.
I couldn't agree with you more.
I
couldn't agree with you more. I think it's in my opinion, and you know, I look at the organizations want people to come back because, you know, there's an immense amount of pressure from business leaders, owners, political parties, right, trying to get people back into the city, if you will, you know, and we don't really care about how people feel or operate. And I think it's going to be a great big challenge for Toronto going forward. When we think about Toronto traffic, we think about how people are going to come back to work 5 days a week. We think about how they don't have the space to do it anymore because they got rid of all this real estate. I mean, hot topic.
There's no humanity in any of that requirement. Like, you're not getting your best from anyone when you're forcing them into something.
100%.
The other thing too, and this is a tangent that I will go off on forever, is I do think a lot of corporate roles are biased towards extroverts and not introverts and not neurodiversity. Like, being in an office that is that chaotic is not great for people with neurodiversity concerns. And we're just not built for that. But yet COVID allowed, and that lockdown allowed people to thrive in new ways.
So smart.
That we're losing and pulling back that, and it's not great.
I call myself an ambivert, right? Like a hybrid, if you will. And I have no problems, you know, being by myself.
Same.
But there are typically, you know, or historically, the leaders are the extroverts,
Yeah.
right? And they want to see, they feed off of that energy of people in the space.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. That's a part two.
Part two. I was like,
that's a
that's
part
a
two.
whole different tangent about how
Yeah.
workplaces are built.
This is the part of the pod where I get into the rapid fire,
Okay, let's do it.
right? Where I like to shift the energy and just come up with some fun questions and see how you answer these in one sentence quickly. What's a word that best describes how you see yourself today?
Curious.
What's a core value you'll never compromise on?
Trust.
A moment that instantly grounds you in gratitude.
Sitting at my sewing machine today, making Christmas gifts for people because it's a skill I was gifted at 7 years old.
A moment that instantly grounds you. Oh, sorry, I asked you that. What's the one belief you've outgrown?
That what success looks like.
Good. When do you feel most like yourself?
Having intimate conversations like this, where we get to debate ideas.
Love it. What's your superpower in one sentence?
Listening to people and pulling out, creating space for people to say what they really want to, and creating sort of that brave space.
Okay. Finish this sentence. The world needs more
Humanity.
The truth I'm living right now is.
Do it afraid.
And my final question. At the end of your life journey, how do you want to be remembered?
Somebody who just pulled at the random strings and followed them to a lot of different places.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Jen, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
What I loved about today's conversation is how clearly it shows that self-perception begins with where we come from. Our families, our cultures, our early influences, they shape the way we see ourselves. As we grow, that perception can either strengthen or shake our ability to trust ourselves. So here's a question to reflect on. How does your family story still shape the way you see yourself and the way you trust your own voice? Trusting yourself doesn't mean being perfect. It means believing you're worthy of your own choices, even when the outcome is uncertain. Thank you for listening to the Who Project podcast. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who's learning to trust themselves too. And remember, on the next episode, we'll explore another pillar of the truth framework. Until then, keep listening to your voice, keep living your truth out loud, and remember that your self-perception is your superpower.